In 1976, director Tobe Hooper followed up the cult success of his horror film, The Texas Chainsaw Massacre, with something even more nightmarish and deranged. Once again, a sweaty, grimy movie about dangerous psychopaths in the Deep South. This time, loosely based on the true story of Joe Ball, a bar owner who had murdered several women and reportedly had fed them to his pet alligator. Unlike Texas Chainsaw, this film was shot entirely on a soundstage and relied less on documentary-style realism and more on queasy surrealism. But, like the Texas Chainsaw, it was reportedly a difficult production for everyone involved, and Tobe Hooper reportedly walked off the project shortly before it ended. This proved to be a pattern with Tobe Hooper, who often was involved in difficult productions. In 1981, he was given the job to direct a killer snake movie called Venom, but left the project early on and was replaced by Blood on Satan's Claw director Piers Haggard. Even without Hooper, this production was notoriously problematic, not because of having to deal with a live black mamba, but because of working with two of the most notoriously difficult actors in the industry, Oliver Reed and Klaus Kinski. Join me as we continue exploring the evolution of nature in horror, and we discuss two unhinged animal attack movies, Eaten Alive and Venom. Welcome back to the evolution of horror. My name is Mike Muncer, and as ever, I am your host. In this podcast, we explore and dissect the history and the evolution of the horror genre, one subgenre at a time. We are currently in the middle of our 10th season, exploring the evolution of nature biting back in horror. And this week, we are talking about two notoriously troubled productions, Tobe Hooper's Eaten Alive and Piers Haggard's Venom. These will both be spoilerific discussions. Give them both a watch before you listen to our conversation, if you dare. So, joining me to discuss these two insane movies, a very long-time friend of the pod. He is one of my fellow Dream Warriors. He is host and creator of the Brain Rot podcast, and he is the star of the new Dolly Parton jukebox musical, Here You Come Again, which is currently touring around the UK. Stevie Webb, hello.
Hi, it's me.
How are you doing? You're like on the road touring right now. Where are you in the UK right now as we're recording this?
I am. I'm on tour. I'm currently in Nottingham. Mm-hmm. And I don't know where I am next week. I normally just check at the end of the week where do I turn up next week. But yeah, I'm touring with Here You Come Again, the new Dolly Parton musical, and yeah, having a ball.
I'm so excited to come see it. How is the show going? It sounds incredible.
It's insane. I've never been in a show like this because obviously I was in the Book of Mormon for so many years, and that's a very specific type of show. Where it's very set and it's slick, and it's there's no wiggle room with it. Whereas with this one, it's the first time I've done one of these shows where I'm not going to say it's a free for all because I don't want the audience, because we've had some interruptions and some awkward moments, but it's one of those shows where we include absolutely everybody in the room, so the audience are part of it. I mean, the very opening, I do a fake sort of stand-up set to the audience because it's set in lockdown and I'm locked in and isolating in my parents' attic.
Yeah.
And so I'm going a little bit stir crazy. And so I'm imagining the audience are there, pretending that they're my audience at a stand-up. And so we open up that fourth wall, and it's unlike anything I've ever done. And then, of course, you've got all of Dolly Parton's hits.
Incredible. What I love as well, and what I'm sure listeners of this podcast will love, is that I've noticed from the stills of the show, you've got some of your horror stuff on stage with you, right? You're wearing like your Halloween T-shirt and things. I was like, I spotted a few like horror Easter eggs in this show.
Yeah, so my character, he's obsessed with Dolly Parton. And I also... There's quite a lot of it where I just spend my time in boxer shorts. And so I've got some very graphic horror tattoos on my thighs. You know, I've got Jason Voorhees and Michael Myers and Tar Man and Evil Ed from Evil Dead on my thighs. And so you could see them. And so they came up with the idea. They were like, so our options are, every show we're going to have to use a lot of tattoo cover to get rid of them so people don't see them. or we incorporate them into the character and don't try and hide them. And so they decided, because it's set in an attic, you've got all these wonderful 80s toys and all these Dolly Parton posters and lots of Easter eggs. So you've got Zippy, and then you've got Sooty and Sweep, and all these little things that end up in the attic from our childhood. And so they thought, well, let's incorporate the horror thing into the character as well. So yeah, I'm wearing a faded old John Carpenter's Halloween t-shirt. If you look around the set, there's Easter eggs, there's some horror Blu-ray, well, not Blu-rays, they're VHS and DVDs. There's a Chucky doll, there's a Gremlins poster, and it's all just peppered throughout. And so I'm actually in my element. Every day I'm surrounded by horror and Dolly Parton. So it's literally perfect.
It's like the Stevie Webb Venn diagram. This really is incredible. I'm so excited to see it. And you're still touring for like the next few weeks and months, right, around the UK for people to come see.
Well, until December.
Amazing.
Yeah, we're touring until December. We've got a couple of weeks off in August, but we're doing everywhere you can imagine. But as I said, don't ask me, because I can't see more than a week ahead at the moment.
Well, what I'm especially impressed with is that you're managing to do this as well as all your horror stuff as well, because you're in the middle of a hiatus at the moment, right, with Brain Rot, but that's coming back at some point too, right?
Yes, so season 5 is coming back in August, and it's a special little themed season, a sort of a concept album, if you will.
Lovely.
And it's called Vicious Varsity, and I've decided it's just going to be a limited series, and it's all films that are slashers set in college or sororities, and that little sort of micro genre. Well, it wasn't micro, there was it? It was fucking huge. There were so many. That's the thing. When I was doing my research, I was like, oh my, there are actually so many more than I thought. And so there were going to be some of the more mainstream ones, like Graduation Day and stuff like that. But then some real deep cuts, like The Majorettes and Blood Cult, and all these ones that people may have not heard of, are Fatal Games. And so I'm really looking forward to that.
Yeah, I watched Killer Party for the first time this year. That's a fun one, isn't it?
Yeah, I'm doing Killer Party.
Yeah, incredible. Oh my God, that's so much fun. So you're managing to juggle all of those. You're managing to find time to watch horror movies still.
I say this, but I'm almost finding it easier because I don't have all of my home distractions, because every week I'm in a different place. I'm in either an Airbnb or digs, and all I've got is my computer, my microphone, and my clothes. And so I have that time. Well, it's not that I don't normally have the time. I normally have the time, but I just don't have the distractions that I normally do.
Of course.
And so actually, I'm finding myself being much more productive than usual.
Amazing. I love it. Well, I'm very excited to discuss these two movies with you today. And let me just, oh my God, let me just ask you, before we get into these films specifically, now, I think we've spoken about this before, maybe on your podcast, but when I first announced that I was doing a whole series on kind of eco-horror, animal attack movies, that kind of thing, you were very excited, weren't you? Tell me your thoughts on this subgenre.
Oh, mate. It was almost overwhelming when you told me that I almost was like, no, you can't do it, because like my brain will explode, because it's everything to me. It's my absolute favorite. It is the subgenre that not only thrills me the most, but truly scares me the most. Because as much as I grew up watching, trashy 80s horror movies and the silly monsters like Ghoulies and Critters and Puppet Master, they thrilled and excited me. But killer animals scared me to fuck. Growing up in a suburban peninsula, I just couldn't wrap my head around the fact that there are literally animals on this earth that can destroy you. So any shark or croc or piranha or bear movie just terrified me to the point of never wanting to travel. To know these creatures were real was incomprehensible, but they were at a safe distance from me. They weren't on my personal doorstep. Mm-hmm. And then, then I'd start to watch films like Slugs or Deadly Eyes, which I know you watched recently, or Mosquito. And then they were a little closer to home, and I started to question what was real and what wasn't, what is a threat. And there's just something about it. This subgenre, it's true fear. But not across the board. I mean, in the 90s, we had that surge of cheap CGI features. It took a bit of a turn. So things like King Cobra and Komodo, those sort of things, they didn't scare me. But nature, man, fuck.
Oh, I know. It's really interesting, isn't it? And I think that's a really fascinating thing about this subgenre is that, like, I think initially a lot of people kind of think, oh, they're just like fun, laughable B movies. Like, people might think of things like Sharknado or, like you say, those kind of 90s B movies, or that massive glut, which we covered last week, of 70s animal attack movies.
Yes.
You know, everything from like frogs to Squirm to all of that kind of stuff. But I agree with you. There is also something very scary and stressful about these movies, right? Like, they genuinely, when they're done well, they are some of the scariest movies out there.
Yeah, I mean, it's the reality of nature and its power. You know, we love to think we're the big guys, right? We're the top of the food chain. We're smart. We're evolved. We're unbeatable. Lads, lads, lads. But then, you know, there's something really grounding and humbling about realizing that we can be considered food. It's like, it's a reality check. And also it's in our DNA to fear beasts. You know, our amygdala is wired to flare up when we see potential threat to life. And I think movies depicting those threats sends the signals to the brain that are uncontrollable, that we don't even realize. We cannot control that. And so it's this primal fear and tension that sets off, and there's something about tickling the amygdala like that really gets me, and I do love it, because it's so hard now, as I'm sure you're the same, to truly feel fear when watching horror films, and we get maybe one a year that's like, oh, that one got me, because maybe it's something someone hasn't ever thought of before. It's a new way of presenting a ghost story. But when it comes to animals, it's not. It's physical, it's DNA, it's electrical in our brain. And so that is why that taps something completely different for me.
Yeah, and do you think that's why, like, it feels like, you know, these subgenres that we've talked about in the past have kind of like peaks and troughs, and I feel like these movies have kind of, basically since the 70s really, have just endured, right? Like, even this year alone, we've had like a couple of new shark movies out this month. We've had a couple of big new spider movies. Like, these movies continue, it seems to me, to be like crowd pleasing and popular, right? Like, they've got a real enduring power.
Yeah, they've never really gone away. And even as we say, but they've had highs and lows, and you know, that 90s, what I call low, but some people absolutely adore all those terrible. You know, even Tobe Hooper himself did that fucking Crocodile movie with the CGI.
Yes.
You know, just this year alone, Full Moon Features released a movie called Bad CGI Gator. So we're also aware that is its own thing. But yeah, it will never stop, because we're human beings, and that's just our biological makeup. It does something to us. But also, it's possible as well. I mean, you know, my biggest fears, are clowns and sharks. And both of them are kind of irrational, because yes, actually both a shark and a clown could kill me. It's possible, but it's highly unlikely. But you won't find me swimming in deep water or chilling at the circus. You know, I literally would not let my family swim in the sea on holidays when I was a kid. I would be screaming and crying so much that they'd have to go in secret. Like, my sister would have to distract me and take me off for an ice cream so that my parents could go for a dip. And the irony in that is, you know, me and my sister were then probably in 100 times more danger wandering off on our own in Tenerife at 7 years old than my parents were wading in 5 feet of water. And it's all down to the movies and that trigger.
Oh, that's incredible. And I was going to ask you about that, actually. I mean, like, you've done a lot of traveling in your career and that kind of thing. Do you find yourself, are you a very outdoorsy person? Are you good at, like, camping and just being out there with the elements generally, would you say?
In England, yeah. I mean, in England, it's fine because I feel, you know, relative safety. But I think it's funny that we're going to be talking about, you know, alligators / crocodile. We will get into that movie. Yes. The thing with crocodiles and, alligators is we share a domain with them. Whereas, you know, when you cross that shoreline into the water, you're then in the shark's domain. You know, we're not meant to be in there. So that's your choice going in there. But with alligators, we've all seen the videos of alligators fucking having a wander down a golf course. And it's like, we have to cohabit with them. So actually that scares me. If I'm ever somewhere where and I've been to Florida, you know, and I've told this story on my podcast. We were at Florida and we went to the Everglades on one of those, you know, those boats with the big fan at the back.
Yeah.
And my mum got out to take a picture of us. It's insane to take a picture of us in the boat. And so the guy who was steering this wind boat, I can't think what they're called. So he did a loop to try and get a bit further away so that she could get a nice picture of us coming towards. And we suddenly saw her waving.
Oh God.
And we were like, oh, she's telling us to pose or whatever. So we're sort of waving back, like thinking that's going to be the picture. But as we got closer, we realized she was waving as in, get the fuck back here now.
Oh.
And it's because there was a fucking alligator about 5 feet back. She heard it crawling.
Yeah.
She heard something like approaching. So she was waving at us to come back, and we were all waving back like, yay, Florida.
It is terrifying. Yeah, I've literally just done the same thing recently. I went to the New Orleans kind of like Mississippi swamp and everything. And again, like, it's really fun, but also there's a bit of me that's like, should I be doing this? There was one point when we just, you know, the guy stopped the little airboat thing, whatever it's called, and there was just like 6 or 7 alligators just around us, like swimming, circling us, and everyone was like, "Ooh," taking photos, taking selfies with them. But I'm like, no, they want to kill us. Like that's why they're circling us, right? And it's like it's absolutely terrifying, isn't it? Absolutely terrifying. Alligators and crocodiles. We'll get to these, but they are some of the scariest things to me because like you said, you're not really safe in water or on land, right? And you just think I don't stand it. What are you supposed to do? You're supposed to climb a tree, I think, right? I mean, sure. I mean,
one.
with my
or running a zigzag, isn't that the one?
I love again these methods. They don't install kind of confidence in me, right? Like I've told this story before, but like when I went to Yosemite too, and there were signs that said like if you see bears or mountain lions which have been spotted in this area, don't run away. Just like wave your arms and scare them off. Yeah. And I'm like, oh sure. Yeah, I'm sure that'll happen. Yeah.
Sure, I'm gonna go against every little instinct in my body and wave at a fucking mountain lion. I had that in Canada. I can't believe this was a real thing that he said to us, but I was filming in Canada. I think it was in about 2000. And we're filming in an area that had cougars and mountain lions. And we had a ranger that had to come and give us a safety talk. And he said, you know, if a lion pops onto set, just stand still and let it do its business. And you're like, what are you talking about? Stand still and let it do its business? No. What if I'm its business? And then to finish it off, he said, and if you must run, remember, you don't have to be able to run faster than a cougar, just the people you're with.
Fucking
And I was like, that's not encouraging.
Jesus Christ.
I'm asthmatic. I'm
exactly. Then there's that poor kid that came last every sports day that's like, oh, great, thanks.
That was
thanks
me.
For that.
Yeah, that was me, mate, because I'd be on the ground in a heap going... My stupid little deflating lungs.
Oh my God. Oh, well, let's get into this. We're going to start off down in the southern bayou swamp. I don't know what this nightmare place is that it's set. I don't know. Right. But we're going to start by talking about Tobe Hooper's Eaten Alive from 1976.
If you were one of the millions of moviegoers who were electrified by the unbearable suspense and sheer terror of Jaws, get ready for Eaten Alive.
Oh my God. Stevie, start us off, set the scene for us. Give us a little brief plot synopsis of Eaten Alive.
I'll try. Okay, Eaten Alive. So, Judd, a shell-shocked war vet, runs the Starlight Motel in a boggy bayou. It's the sort of place you'd imagine never gets any customers. But today, it's fucking busier than Argos on Black Friday. We have Buck, who's raring to fuck, the local toxic male, Clara, an exiled sex worker, Faye, Roy, and Angie, a family of 3 with a dynamic that makes my family look like the Osmonds, Clara's sister and terminally ill father who are searching for their runaway kin, and of course the African crocodile that waits hungrily in the swamp behind the establishment, ready to be fed anybody who slightly perturbs Judd. Judd's delicately depicted PTSD causes him to be rather reactionary. He might scythe you in the neck for looking for your daughter, gag you and bind you for having a shower, or merely slap the shit out of you for being a woman. Finally, Judd gets a taste of his own medicine and becomes croc food, and we're left once again with Marilyn Burns traumatically screaming after a narrow escape.
Oh, poor Marilyn Burns, right? Oh my God.
I know. Tobe Hooper has put that woman through so much.
Unbelievable. Now, when I presented you with my big list of movies, all of which you love, right?
Yes.
And there were movies that I was sure you wanted to talk about, like The Reef, for example, which I know is a big favourite of yours, but you were like, I want to do Eaten Alive, and the other movie we're going to talk about. Why was that, Stevie? What is it about this movie? What do you kind of think about this movie generally?
Well, first of all, the reason I couldn't do The Reef, and I commend Becky for being able to do Jaws, is because The Reef it's right up there with my favourite ever shark films, and I think Andrew Traucki is incredible the way he has directed that film. Mm-hmm. And so I almost, it was too much to talk about it. And I actually, because I want to listen to the episode, so I want to hear other people talking about it. So that's why I was like, I'm just going to let someone else do that.
Yeah.
But Eaten Alive, I was desperate to do this one because I don't think enough people truly know about it and have seen it. And also it's Tobe Hooper, and you and I've realized we've discussed quite a lot. Tobe, we've done The Fun House. We've done Salem's Lot. We've done
the space cocaine
vampires,
film.
What is
space vampires?
Wait, what's it fucking Life Force?
Life Force.
Yeah, Life Force.
Yes.
Yeah. And so it felt like we're collecting Tobe Hooper films, and so I really wanted to discuss it. And also, I feel like it's a bit of an anomaly of a film. I have so much time for it. It's a very uncomfortable watch. And I know this sounds strange, but I always find films like this a little bit palate cleansing for me. Because, I watch a lot of really trashy crap. And I'm not saying this is one of the great pieces of American cinema, but it is such an oddity. And it's really hard to categorize it. It doesn't seem to follow any rules or established structure in horror. It's this feverish, sweaty nightmare, and it feels so isolated and cut off from reality. And that makes it really stressful and unnerving. Every single character's got some shit going on. Yeah. And there's no one we can cling on to as our guide. It's like free falling. Yeah. And we're just kind of helpless audience members, and you just kind of have to endure it.
I agree. I think nobody makes me feel like I'm stuck in a nightmare like Tobe Hooper does, right? Like everything about his movies, they're almost unwatchable, but in a really powerful way, right? Yes. Like that feeling you get with Texas Chainsaw too, where you're like, oh my God, when is this going to end, right? When is this nightmare going to end? And I feel the same with Eaten Alive. Actually, tonally, they're very similar, aren't they? I think Texas Chainsaw and Eaten Alive, right? They do feel... In fact, I think this was his... I think he did Funhouse after this, right? And I feel like this movie feels kind of like the midway point between Texas Chainsaw and Funhouse, right? Totally. It has very much a Texas Chainsaw vibe, but with that kind of wild lighting and slightly more of a kind of I don't know, almost like we're in some sort of mad circus attraction type of a place.
Completely. Yeah, totally. It's the atmosphere that he creates is so unique, and as you say, there's this graduation from Texas Chainsaw Massacre, where he was behest to natural lighting and rigid walls and using what he can and his angles, and then this one, which is clearly on a soundstage, but it lends to it so well because he can do more experimental lighting and angles and different shots from within the house, and then going to the Funhouse, which is a big studio movie. That graduation, you can see it, and I think the fact that this was filmed on a soundstage, it really lets him express a little bit more. And I feel honestly, watching it this time, this is I think the third time I've seen it, it feels like a bit of a middle finger up to Hollywood, because I love that you can see that the motel is a set. There's something really uncanny and toy-like about it. You get these shots of the building flooded in red light with a smoke machine rolling over the bog and this clockable, landscape backdrop. And it gives it this old school Hollywood aesthetic, like that classic old 50s Hollywood golden age, and he's fucking with it. And he's completely turning it on its head. And, even having, an Oscar nominated actress from the golden era and bringing all that into it, it feels like he's taken that aesthetic and he's made it fucking horrible.
Yeah. Everything he does, it feels like, in especially his early films, every part of it is there to make you feel as dirty and uncomfortable as possible, right? Like every element, the set design, the lighting, the performances, the dialogue, the editing, everything makes you go, oh God, I don't know if I can bear this, right? But in a sort of good way, if that makes sense.
It is, it's palpable, and you feel like it extends beyond the camera. You feel like everyone behind the camera is in like white vests with oil on them. They're all sweating, all the crew are gross. You can just you feel like it's so grimy, and that is what makes you feel so uncomfortable. It's palpable, and you have that with Chainsaw Massacre as well. I suppose he's great at that sort of immersive filmmaking.
And people have spoken about him, haven't they? I think John Carpenter famously said about him and Texas Chainsaw is that it's a movie that takes you right to the edge of what you think you can handle, and it never quite crosses it, which is what's genius about it. And this movie sort of does that too. Like when we begin, the first shot, right, is of Robert Englund's belt, his crotch, basically, right? You're looking at
undoing his pants.
You're looking at this grainy image of this man undoing his trousers in then what turns out to be a brothel, and you go, oh, and because it's in the 1970s and because it's this kind of exploitation film, you think, oh God, here we go. I'm about to see like a horrible rape scene. And there are so many movies that would have absolutely just shown you that, right, made at this time. And I think Tobe Hooper, again, he almost takes that too far to want to watch, but he just tiptoes right to that line for me, even in that opening scene.
It's immediate. It's immediately uncomfortable and upsetting. There's nothing gradual about it. There's no development of threat. It just plonks you straight in. You go, oh God, I hate this. This feels. Why am I? Oh no, I can't help her because this sex worker who doesn't want to do anal because he's got a taste for anal because it comes back later. That's his thing, and she's not into it. And then the worst thing about it is then the madam comes up and it's her that gets in trouble for not doing anal, and you go, whoa, no, everything is wrong. You can't trust anyone in this, and that's where it sets the bar. But as you say, it doesn't go one step further and it's too far, and you're like, this is just a horrible watch. No. It just immediately puts you in such an uncomfortable position, and then it manages to keep you there. I think
it does.
Not as soon as and then Clara, she gets sent off, so she goes to the fucking Starlight Starlight is the antithesis of what the actual motel is. There's nothing twinkly about it at all. But not 5 minutes has she been there before then Judd assaults her for being a sex worker, pitchforks her within an inch of her life and throws her to a fucking crocodile. And you're like, whoa. And it's very Hitchcockian, but obviously an extreme Hitchcockian opening in the way that we're introduced to this, Hitchcock blonde or this, you have this sort of, this damsel, and the most horrific things happen to her. And you immediately feel like we like her, and then she's gone. And it is that sort of Psycho-esque opening.
It's that Janet Leigh thing, isn't it?
Yeah. It is, yeah.
In fact, Psycho does kind of... I mean, you talked about how it almost feels a bit old Hollywood.
Yes.
There is a Psycho element to this, of course, isn't there? Like this man running a motel in the middle of nowhere, like killing women. And it was also like loosely based on a true story as well, right? Which is insane that there was this man that was killing women and throwing them to his crocodile or something, right? I mean, that's mental.
It was this killer called Joe Ball, and it was in 1930s in Texas, and so he killed several women, and the story is that he would dispose of the bodies by feeding them to his pet alligators. But I mean, that I don't believe it was ever proven, but that is that's the legend, and so that's where the idea for this came from. But of course, also with the character of Judd. I mean, what do I always say? Every film in this decade is always about Vietnam in some way or another. But I think there's the sort of the PTSD. I think Saigon was just the year before this, so there's a lot of that in there as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's the other thing. I mean, that's why I always love, you know, giving time to Tobe Hooper's movies, because I feel like he was such a quiet, thoughtful guy, right, who made the most insane movies. But like, I always feel like what he's doing here, he's doing for a reason, right? That's kind of how I feel about his movies when I watch them, at least, you know. You know, the shit he puts you through and the horrendous things he shows you. But when you look at this in Texas Chainsaw Massacre, the good guy does win, or at least escape, because, you know, with the Marilyn Burns character in this, I mean, her husband Roy, like, what the fuck is wrong with him? And so, you know, he doesn't leave you high and dry and like, oh god, everything is so bleak. He does, you know, he does give you that, you know, there's a reason. There's a sort of there's an arc there, and there's also comments. You know, there's a lot he's making comments of, especially with the Judd character. Well, absolutely, and you know, we talk about this in a kind of Nature Bites Back context, but really, the crocodile is there as a device. It's basically like the killer's own weapon, right? But really, it's human beings that are the scary element of this film, right? And again, Tobe Hooper, you just get the feeling he is terrified of people from the South, first of all, right? But these kinds of like, these kind of like sweaty, unhinged, unpredictable men that live in the kind of rural America, right? I mean, that's what we should really be scared of.
Yeah. And you know, it does fall into the Hicksploitation category, I suppose. But I mean, the thing is, Judd, I think the reason that crocodile is there is because actually Judd completely mirrors what we think of crocodiles, the unpredictable, unforeseeable nature of a crocodile. You know, once you're in their domain, you have no idea when a strike is coming or if it's going to come. And I think that is a lovely little parallel he has there.
I love that.
We have this crocodile and how we picture them and how they're depicted. He is actually the embodiment of what we think of a crocodile.
Yes. Oh my god, I love that. Yeah. So
poetic.
Poetic. Yeah. Beautiful. So before we skip over that opening as well, let me ask you, Robert Englund as well, right? Like,
oh my god, of course.
What an amazing thing to see a young Robert Englund playing such a skeezy character, like you said in your synopsis, right? Buck who wants to fuck. Yeah, that's a very. I wonder if Tarantino took that for Kill Bill, because there's a character in Kill Bill.
That's exactly.
I was going to say it must have been a direct reference, right? How do you find seeing this young babyface Robert Englund in this movie?
Oh, he loves it, doesn't he? Like, he loves acting. He loves performing. He's having the best time, and I love all of these pre-Freddy parts that he played when he was he was a working actor and he was playing true characterful roles, and he was always cast as the slight weirdo, or, you know, whether it's in V or you know, Galaxy of Terror. And I just adore his commitment every time he's on screen, especially pre-Elm Street. Because you see the way he's performing, you go, this guy has got it. He's going to be something, because he's so invested and so immersed in the character, to the point whereas if this was the only thing you ever saw him in, you just go, nah, that guy is like that. He's an absolute womanizing prick.
Yeah, absolutely.
And that's testament to what he can do.
The performances are so good in this because they're so fucking weird, right? So like every character, even Marilyn Burns, like the wig, and like we'll get to that. I'm so confused by every single character in this film, right? But it makes it fascinating. Makes it fascinating. Like you say, the madam that we meet, Miss Hattie, played by Carolyn Jones as well.
Carolyn Jones.
What's going on with her face and the makeup in this movie as well? Like, it's so weird.
It's like Boris Karloff Mummy. There's something so uncanny. Her skin is grey, and her eye makeup is crusted, and it looks like her face is flaking off, and you just go, what is happening? Who is this? And what is her backstory? We're never told why people are the way they are in this movie. You just get to see their quirks and their idiosyncrasies, and you just go, what the fuck was that about? And with her, you're like, oh, there's a whole movie I would watch about her. Because
oh my God.
she's clearly this businesswoman as well. As soon as they come in, when they're looking for the daughter and the sister, she's trying to fucking sell them a plot of land while she's also selling women downstairs. It's just this, it feels like she gets, maybe 4 minutes of screen time, and yet we all
remember her.
This is a fully fleshed out character. She's got a backstory and a future, and it's wild and incredible. And there's not one character that passes you by.
No, there's not one character that you just say, oh, they're just a generic person, a victim, whatever. Like, all of them have something really weird about them. I love it. And we should talk about Judd. What do you make of Judd? This performance by Neville Brand, who was quite a well-known kind of character actor, right? He'd been in a lot of kind of westerns and a lot of old school stuff. How do you find this portrayal of Judd?
I do find him quite terrifying.
Yeah.
Because, especially in contrast to Robert Englund's portrayal, which I think is, both of them are big. Let's just say that.
Yeah.
Both of them are big. But whereas Englund's is very extroverted, the terror with Judd is it's much more internal, and we get to see the sort of the loosening of the cogs. And it's the moments when he's on his own, mumbling, maybe polishing a gun, and you can see a Nazi flag. And all of these terrifying symbols that just suggest someone who is completely unstable and unpredictable. And I think it's a really fantastic performance. As I said, a lot of people will find it big and maybe hammy, but I find it genuinely unsettling, because I worry for every single person that comes into contact with him, and he's also not one of those antagonists that you get behind and go, oh, I can't wait for him to kill the next person. Yeah. You actually don't want people to interact with him. And that's always a hard thing to do, I think, especially when you go to a horror film to see gore and see kills, to actually not want this person to lose their shit is a hard task.
You're right, actually. You're absolutely right. You're kind of like, oh, God, please let this person, this child, this mother be okay, right? And more often than not, they're not. And he is. He's so unpredictable. We don't really understand. We get glimmers of a backstory, like you say, but we don't really understand why he's doing what he's doing. He is channeling, for me, who I always find the scariest character in Texas Chainsaw, more so than Leatherface, the hitchhiker character, right? And like it basically feels like Tobe Hooper took that hitchhiker character and gave him his own film almost, right? And he is. I always found him the much more frightening, way scarier than Leatherface, because there's I don't know, there's a sadism, I think there's a joy in what he's doing, I think it's great. I think it's one of those sort of. I think it's up there with the sort of David Hess of it all, in that he genuinely gets under my skin in this. Exactly, yeah. David Hess is another great comparison, yeah. And that, like, scythe pitchfork thing that he has to kill people as well. Oh my God.
And it's the fact that he doesn't let most of the people that he attacks with his ridiculous tools, he doesn't let them die from that. He kind of maims them and then enjoys feeding. That's why it's eaten alive. Right. Even with Clara, when he's pitchforked her, she's moaning and sort of barely conscious. And instead of giving her one more to finish her off, he then throws her into the pond so that she gets eaten alive. And that happens, the scythe through the neck. That is so. I suppose we haven't really talked about the kills and the gore of it all. It's all fantastic, and it's the stuff that I love, because there's something about the tone of the film that makes you think maybe it's not going to be too heavy on the animal attacks and the actual kills, but each kill is really gruesome. Yes. And that one where the Clara's father gets the scythe, it goes through the neck and out the other side, and he's like going and choking and gagging, and then gets it's horrendous. And just before that attack, there's this incredible shot of Judd running with the scythe, and it's in slow motion, and that to me is cinema, and it is one of those shots that I remember the very first time I saw it, because he's directly coming to us at camera. We are POV, and it's just genius.
Well,
with all this red lighting, and it's surrealist and this feverish nightmare.
It is, and I was going to ask you about that. I mean, we touched upon this already, but like, you know, with Texas Chainsaw, he was really going for like a almost documentary style realism, right? You know, like it almost feels like what you're watching is real footage at times. Whereas he's doing something completely different in this one, isn't he? Like it feels like he like you said, that extreme, like almost Argento-esque lighting and the slow-mo. Yeah. It's like we're in some sort of surreal dream or something in this movie, right?
Oh yeah, we're not in realism at all, and I love that. And I think he is reveling in being able to have the tools, because of the soundstage and stuff, to play with those sorts of things and things we hadn't seen from him before. And so, you know, there's nothing natural about that red light. You know, it doesn't try and pretend to be the sunset. It is blood red, and everything is flooded with it. And as you say, it has that slightly Argento feel to it, but it just sets this movie just out of the realms of reality. It's not so surrealist that you're it's mind-bending, but it's just outside of the realms of reality that it unsettles you whilst keeping you grounded, and makes the action more terrifying because that is set in realism. Yeah,
completely agree with you. Right, it's just on the edge, isn't it? I think, and it's the same with these characters, because then we meet, you know, Faye, played by Marilyn Burns, and her husband Roy, their little girl Angie,
Kyle
Richards again. Like, what a cast actually in this movie, right? It's insane. What is going on with this family? And then there's a monkey in a cage. There's a dog. Like, it's so. This is where I start to. The film just starts to unravel, and I go, "What is going on?" You know?
Yeah, and I love that. I love that we don't get their backstory. We get them in the middle of a crisis. Something has happened. They've fallen out. We don't know what it is. Then he's going, "Oh, you put your cigarette out of my eye," and he's pretending to find his eye, which isn't missing, trying to find it on the floor. And this dynamic, why is she wearing a wig? Are they on the run?
Right.
What is going on? What is he? Oh my gosh. You have no time to even try and work out what could possibly have happened. And it's so deliberate. I love that. I love that it doesn't give you a chance to feel like you can settle.
No.
Because you're like, not only have we got the fucking croc and the guy with the scythe, this guy's a worry. This dude,
honestly,
crawling around, screaming and barking. Like, what?
You're so right. You're like, you know that they are wrong-uns, this family, right? And we get just enough of a glimpse of them, particularly Roy, where there are certain moments that Roy has where you're just like, what is going on with this dude, right? And but it never explains anything. It just like drops you into this situation, and then they start getting attacked and killed and mauled and everything else, and you're just like, oh my god, you know, it's a pure nightmare fuel.
Yeah, and I feel there is definitely reference to Psycho with this part, with her rocking up in the sort of the Hitchcock blonde wig, and they're obviously on the run from something, or they've done something, they have to, you know, lie low in a motel off the beaten track, and so that's definitely in there. And I think there's deliberate parallels and references in there, but this is just a much more acid tab version.
The scenes as well when he just, like, you mentioned it in your synopsis, where he just like ties up women and just like hits them around the face and stuff. And again, you're just like, what is happening? Yeah.
They're the hardest watches, because I think pretty much every female that steps in there is attacked by him. And that moment where she's sort of running a bath, and he just, the thing is, there's no trigger on this one. You know, with most of the kills, he's in the room with that person, they do something or say something that sets him off. Whereas this one, he goes looking for her, and he just bursts in and he ties her up. And that for me is the most uncomfortable, and makes me squirm a bit, because it feels so wild and unnecessary. And then she spends the rest of the film gagged and bound to a bed.
Yeah.
And other customers can sort of hear this screaming.
Oh, God. The sound design, right? Again, it's like Texas Chainsaw is almost unbearable. Like, you want to turn the volume down because it's just that thing that Tobe Hooper loves to do, where it's just like, keep screaming, scream louder, now scream over each other. Now Judd can scream and laugh, and she's going to scream, and the little girl screams, and it's just this like this absolute attack on your senses, isn't it? Of just screams and pain and terror. Yeah.
Yeah. The very end of the film is all about the mounting sound, because you've got Marilyn Burns still screaming. You've got Kyle Richards crying. You've got these bells, these sort of tubular bells and chimes going off in the soundtrack. You've got the country music radio going on.
Yes.
And then you've got the sound of a light going wah, wah, and it just builds and builds and builds to blackout. And I think the sound design is one of the strongest things about this film, because it is an assault. But it's all very, very deliberate. It's not an assault in the sense that, you go, oh God, this is just disturbing me and it's too much. It's the juxtaposition of some things, like you've got this lovely country song going on in the background while he's, cleaning a shotgun or he's scything someone. And that sort of, that sound of a porch light that's always in the background like that.
Yeah.
That humming.
Yeah.
Oh.
So good. Over on Patreon, Kaiju, or Kai July, actually, as it now is in full swing. Me and friend of the pod, Matt Draper, are currently making our way through a bunch of the best kaiju monster movies from different eras over the last 50 or 60 years. We began part 1 by talking about 2 movies from the Showa era. We discussed Mothra from 1961 and Godzilla vs. Hedorah from 1971. Then we moved on to the Heisei era to discuss Godzilla vs. Destroyer and Gamera, Guardian of the Universe. Coming up over the next few weeks, we're going to be bringing patrons part 3 to discuss Godzilla, Mothra and King Ghidorah, Giant Monsters All-Out Attack, and Godzilla Final Wars. So exciting. And then for the final part of our retrospective, we're going to finish with 2 of the modern masterpieces of kaiju monster films. We're going to be talking about Shin Godzilla and, of course, finishing with Godzilla -1. These are all deep dive discussions, and Matt Draper, who has seen every single kaiju movie, is quite the expert. So it was really, really lovely to be joined by Matt to discuss these movies in depth. So if you want to listen to our kaiju miniseries, you need to sign up to our Patreon at a $10 level. Just head to patreon.com/evolution of horror. $10 per month gets you access to absolutely everything. You will get a new episode every single week. Even while the main podcast is on breaks and hiatus, you will always still get brand new content on Patreon every single week. But you can also go down to just $5 per month and you'll get at least 1 new episode per month, including Fresh Blood, our monthly review strand where we discuss and review all the new releases in horror. But everybody who signs up to our Patreon, no matter what tier, will also get a little shout out on the main feed as a thank you. So speaking of, I'm going to give everybody who signed up in the month of May a little thanks. A big thank you to Jordana, Russell Roberts, Lishmo, Leon Timmins, Hope Mowry, Jason Gray, Ozkan Danis, Lauren Sides, Andrew Terry, Neff Cooper, Charlotte House, Rumble Fox, Zach Bamer, Connor Kiln, Emma Spool, Nikki Beasley, Jim Hrabak, Jay Simpson, Brian Hollis, Ian, Chris Hales, Who Dares Rolls, James Watts, Manuel Diaz, Fright Night Femme, Eric Loeck, Thomas Jenkins, Gary Skinner, Erin Porrington, Robert Curry, Alan Jordan, Nathan Leviton, Professor Lupe Lex, Phil, British Wrong Style, Helen Wimpney, Simon Bell, Britta Borgman, Damien Fenton, Charlotte Frayne, Valentina Yamamoto, EM, Joshi, Benjamin O'Mara, IM Pangs, Keith JF82, Eric Bartonhagen, Iomo, Joel Hicks, Pedro Pascal, Kat, Eve, John Mannion, Evan, Mariana Magnani, and Monica Stamper. A huge thank you to all of those people for signing up to our Patreon. And one more time, if you want to join them and get treated to regular bonus content and more, then sign up now. Patreon.com/evolution of horror. That's patreon.com/evolution evolution of horror. Shall we talk about this crocodile, right? Because I'm
Right.
a bit confused by this, because I sort of thought, and I don't know, maybe I'm completely wrong, people can correct me on this, but I thought that crocodiles you don't actually get in places like the swamps of the US. I thought you just get alligators, right? And they make a point to say this isn't an American alligator, this is a crocodile from Africa.
No, it's a Nile crocodile.
Yeah, what on earth? How did this, what on earth's going on here?
I don't know why the choice was made, but it was made, Mike. And so we have to accept it. So basically, yes, he has a line where he tells Kyle Richards, oh, you don't need to worry about it. It's an African crocodile, so they can't move the way alligators can. So it's sort of suggesting that, it has to stay in the water. It won't. And I never really know why we're giving that information, because it definitely does go into the crawl space and... it's his pride. It's his pride and joy. The fact that he's got a Nile crocodile. I mean, could it even survive? Isn't there are they both freshwater? I don't know. But that's the confusing thing. But I suppose it doesn't matter for a film like this, right? But I think it's just an interesting choice that they didn't choose to just make it an alligator. Yeah, it's really interesting. And I looked it up, and apparently crocodiles are much more aggressive generally than alligators. I think they are just scarier animals that kill more people than alligators do. So maybe that's part of it. It just makes it slightly more dangerous. And sure.
Well, I mean, sure. And we've mentioned this a little bit at the beginning of our chat, but
because that's the part of the movie they decided to go with realism.
Yeah.
No, we need to...
Exactly.
No,
exactly.
the facts need to line up
get
on
the
that.
animals right. Yeah. Yeah. We mentioned this a bit at the beginning of the episode, but alligators and crocodiles, I feel like they're probably, other than maybe sharks, one of the most kind of ubiquitous animals in these types of movies, right? Like, what is it about these creatures that inherently terrify us so much, do you think?
Well, they're the big two, aren't they? They're the Jason and Michael of the real world.
Yes.
Because they're these prehistoric beings that have lasted and evolved and become perfect killers. I say perfect. I think is it crocodiles or alligators that are basically blind underwater, but they because it happens. We do hear reports of attacks. Of people being bitten or ripped apart by these creatures that we share a planet with, that aren't dinosaurs that have been extinct. They've lasted and they're here,
right? And
they can kill us and do kill us.
Yes,
and so that's why they're ubiquitous in it, because they're real. They're not fantasy, and I still sometimes cannot get my head around it, and they both fascinate and terrify me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree with you, and I think it is something about that kind of, like Becky mentioned this about sharks too, that both these creatures are like ancient, right? Like you say, like they were around at the time of the dinosaurs. Like they have outlasted us, and they will outlast us, I reckon, probably, right?
Yeah.
Like
they've got years on us.
Oh, absolutely, right?
In terms of evolution,
and they are more powerful. And I think we know that, like you said, there's something in our brains, there's something evolutionary in us, I think, that knows that these things are bigger and badder and stronger and higher, basically higher than us in the food chain, which we don't like to think about, I think,
We don't like to admit that,
no.
though. But that's exactly what it is. When, if we are faced with either of those things, they've got the upper hand, and we don't like to admit that. We don't like to feel that. We don't like to feel smaller, weaker, or lesser than any other being. So that is why they are such a threat, not only to us physically, but to us. Well, they're kind of a threat to our ego as well, aren't they?
Yeah. I think so. I think that is what it is. We don't like to think that we're not the most powerful people on this planet, right? I think, like, look at how many people still deny, climate change being a thing or whatever else. Like, people just, in absolute denial that there is something bigger and more powerful than us in nature, So finally then, like, how do you find, I mean, this plot kind of like meanders along, right? We have this kind of the father of Clara who comes into it looking for his daughter, right? And we get more attacks hacks. And
he's terminally ill, just to add another layer.
Ill. Really weird, really weird. How do you find the way in which this plot kind of concludes in its final act? Do you find it a kind of satisfying conclusion?
I mean, the thing is, when you talk about the plot concluding, what plot is that? That's what I really like about this. Is I kind of touched on it earlier, that we're not set up to follow one person's journey and hope they come out of it alive. Different people enter the situation and leave either by their own means or by death.
Yeah,
and so it doesn't round up and round off the story. It's not like we start somewhere and then follow that journey. And it just ends up in this ridiculous cacophony of various things happening. And it is just this gradient of messy terror.
Yeah.
I think I don't really know. I don't know how to explain how it ends, because we have survivors, we have people. Obviously, he gets his comeuppance, and we see his lovely little leg pop up in the water.
Incredible! Yeah,
but
incredible.
it doesn't leave me feeling
No.
It doesn't leave me feeling resolved in any way. It just leaves me feeling like, well, that was horrible. It's not, it's not enjoyable in any way or in any sense.
That's so true, right? Like, Judd is killed by his own crocodile. Great. But yeah, you don't really feel like a sense of catharsis or anything, right? You just you just kind of breathe a slight sigh of relief.
Yeah. Well, that's everyone's life ruined, even the survivors. They're never going to get over what the fuck just happened.
It is. What a movie, right? I mean, and obviously, as anyone could imagine having seen this film, I don't think it was received particularly well. And it was, I think, part of the kind of video nasties wave, wasn't it? Like, it was banned and everything.
Yeah, it got caught up in all that. It was released here as a Death Trap because it came out later. And obviously there was the Lenzi film in, I think, 1980 that was called Eaten Alive, so as not to confuse.
Yes. But yeah, do you feel like this movie is still, is it still kind of underrated, underseen, and how do you find the way in which the film is kind of like, how has it held up, I suppose, across the last 50 years?
I think it is both of its time and yet an anomaly at the same time, which is, I know, is a contradiction, but that's why I feel like more people should see it. But I do think within our circles, those who have seen it do regard it as a solid film and a very uncomfortable watch. And I think it is essential in the sort of the filmography of Hooper. I think it is an essential step in his journey to watch him grow and become the director he becomes. Not to say he didn't start as a fucking amazing director, but you can really, if you go chronologically, you can really see this incredible journey that he goes on, and what he disregards or what he keeps and how he develops. And so as part of that journey, I think it is, and you mentioned that like it's the stepping stone between Chainsaw Massacre and Funhouse, and I think without this in the middle, that seems like such a leap. But when you have this, you see it. You see that
absolutely
that evolution.
You see that great, because this is the mad thing about Tobe Hooper, right? Is that then you watch something like Poltergeist and you're like, what on earth? Like how has this man ended up here? And and we'll talk about this in with the next film in a minute. Like, there are always stories about Tobe Hooper clashing with producers. He left this project early, right before it wrapped. Like, he gets kicked off of projects, he leaves projects, he clashes with producers, other people have to come in and sometimes finish his films for him. Like, there always seems to be this like element of chaos, right, surrounding a Tobe Hooper movie as well.
Yes, that's so true. That's so true. And I think that's part of it. I think, a happy, seamless Tobe Hooper production, such as Crocodile, which was, which went well and they kept a schedule as far as I'm aware. And then it's just, it's a bit of a flop and it's not very exciting film. So I think it's all in there. You watch his films and you can feel the work and you can feel the stress surrounding it, that not just on screen. I think when you watch a film, and I mean, we'll talk about the next one, when you can palpably feel the production more than the actual content of the film.
Yes.
I think that's always that always adds a little spice.
It does. It adds something to these movies. And I feel like with these early Tobe Hooper movies, I feel like, God, these actors are probably having a terrible time, right? I mean, like, famously on Texas Chainsaw, they all had the worst time ever, and I just think this can't have been much more fun for poor Marilyn Burns, right? You're like crazy.
Yeah. I mean, at least this was probably air conditioned.
Yes, that's true. That's true. At least they were on a soundstage. They could just like step outside, maybe go to a dressing room. You never know. Yeah, so that's true. Yeah. That's true. All right. Well, we're going to move forward 5 years to 1981 to a movie that, again, Tobe Hooper was supposed to direct this, but he quit early on due to...
He started to,
That's right. He started directing it, but quit due to, quote, creative differences, and was replaced by Piers Haggard, who had directed things like Blood on Satan's Claw and other kind of British films. So this is Venom, right, from 1981.
Venom. The kidnap that became a murder, that became a siege, that became a death trap. Venom. The fear explodes, trapping both hostages and kidnappers in its grip. The panic spreads, sending an entire police force into action. But this is a terror unlike anything anyone has ever faced. And when it uncoils to strike, your blood will run cold.
Fuck me. Okay. So you might think Venom is the story of a well-to-do family under threat from a deceiving chauffeur and housemaid who plot to steal an unappealing yellow car from them. You might think Venom is about the threat of a black mamba slithering around the house once it's under siege and a stakeout is underway. But you'd be wrong. Venom is an experiment in which Klaus Kinski and Oliver Reed are forced to be locked in the same building as each other for as long as possible. It is an endurance test and death match. Sure, the snake bites a dick and fingers are severed, but the real tension is between these two notoriously monstrous performers, and it's cockfighting of the most delicious palpability.
yes, absolutely. You can feel the rivalry, the tension, right, between these actors. Incredible. I love it.
It's such a setup.
Oh.
It is such a setup, getting those two men in the same room. And originally, one of them was meant to be Sean Connery, and I'm so glad, no offense against Sean Connery, thank fuck that it wasn't, because actually without those two specifically and the tension you could feel between them, I'm not sure the film would be as enjoyable.
No, I agree with you. It keeps that momentum going, just watching these two very unhinged men at the centre of this movie, right? Again, another very strange movie. What do you think of Venom generally, Stevie?
I don't know what I think of it. I wasn't sure if I'd seen it before, and I realised I'd mixed it up with another film called like SSSSS, which is another, of course. It was just one of those. And also, I think it was the second one of two snake movies that Oliver Reed did in the same year. He did another one.
Right.
So it's in my head, I was like, I can't really remember this, but I also remembered that definitely Tobe Hooper was somehow involved. This film is fucking weird. It's neither this nor that. It's got this sort of Mary Poppins Dickensian aesthetic sometimes, whilst also then having snake attacks and then these very, very detailed side characters, and it turns into a siege movie, and the whole thing is mostly a negotiation between, a Gloucester Road window and a policeman, a Scottish policeman, and you're just like, what is going on? Where's the snake?
Yes, they sort of forget about the snake at points, I think, don't they? And you're right, like, this movie feels like it's fighting to be about 6 different things. It's like, it's a sort of home invasion movie in a way. It's a sort of, like you say, a siege thriller. It's an animal attack movie. It's like, what is this film? It's so strange. And yes, this kind of like child... There were parts of it that almost, I don't know why, reminded me of Extra, like the little boy in this London house with weird shit happening to him, right? There's something very British about it as well. It's just British. A strange, queasy mix, right?
It really is, but it is constantly watchable. That's one thing, because where it may, fall flat on paper in certain parts, there's always something to keep you engaged, whether it be the performances or suddenly randomly, oh, now there is a snake again, and so it's constantly keeping you on your toes. But it is a very, very strange movie. And obviously knowing that there was difficulties in production and Hooper stepping off at the last minute and Haggard having to join in, I think there's some really interesting stuff there. But obviously Haggard, it's just, I mean, say what you want, but it is about the cast and what is going on that screen and behind the scenes, Totally. And I know Haggard had a really hard time directing it. He was brought in at the last minute, of course. He spent most of his time wrangling the fucking actors. I think he was quoted saying, it wasn't just one black mamba on set, it was a nest of vipers.
Right. I can believe it because, well, maybe we should start by talking about the actors. Klaus Kinski, who absolutely is renowned, right, for being this monster. I mean, he was a monster. Like, every story you hear about him on Werner Herzog films, all the other movies he was in around this time, he was basically a bit of a psychopath, like genuine psychopath, I think, right? He could be violent with other actors and directors. Yeah. He was aggressive. He screamed at people. He would constantly storm off. Like, he was the true example of a kind of monstrous actor, right? And of course, Oliver Reed, like you say, also kind of known for that, right? He was an alcoholic. He was aggressive. He could be quite mean and bullish towards people. Putting those two together as the main, really, it's just those two in a house with a few other characters floating about, right? It's really something to behold, isn't it? I think.
Yeah, it's the male equivalent of Baby Jane. That's
true.
Yes. That's the sort of setup we've got there. But having said all that, I think it lends itself to the movie because they are both trying to outdo each other, and you can see that they are uncomfortable. And it was widely reported that they really hated each other, and Oliver Reed was constantly playing tricks on Klaus and deliberately fucking him up and teasing him. And I think the difference between the two is that, Reed's reputation came from a much more annoying, like, he was deliberately disruptive.
Yeah, he was a bit
whereas Klaus
laddie,
was volatile
almost,
and nasty.
right?
He was laddie. It was very, his reputation was much more like pub humor and being a bit of just being like, oh, for fuck's sake, you we're losing the light.
Yeah.
Reed, can you fucking take it seriously and stop being a dick? Whereas Klaus was, he was a very serious actor. He took it incredibly seriously, and anything that pissed him off or sort of got in the way of his acting, he would lose his shit. And so having those two different approaches and two different reputations, I think, is what makes this movie endlessly watchable. And I mean, poor Haggard, though, he really had his work cut out for him, but I do think it works in his favor, because what the film does lack in maybe tension, it makes up for in tension of a different kind. Some of the interactions between them are deliciously subtextual, and it really does feel like that's the draw. And I fell into an absolute rabbit hole reading all the different accounts and stories about the making of this film, and you could make an entire documentary about the making of this. I know there's a documentary about the reputation of Klaus himself, but a documentary about this film and its genesis and where it ended up would be really interesting, because even Oliver Reed playing a chauffeur, apparently when he has the scene where he has to pick up Klaus Kinski, he didn't want to be seen like being the driver for Klaus Kinski. So there's a scene where you see it and he takes off his chauffeur's hat and he throws it because he refused to be seen in the front while he was in the back of the car. All of these things are just so fascinating. And I think it's a film that you can watch and then go and research, and that makes it 20 times more enjoyable. It's about movie making rather than the movie, I think.
I agree with you. Yeah, it's one of those classic examples of the behind the scenes stories are almost more interesting than the film itself. The film has its moments though, like it's a kind of fun setup, right? And
definitely,
I think particularly the first half I really enjoyed. I think when it gets to the policeman negotiating through the window for like half an hour of the second half, it started to lose me a little bit, but there's some great stuff at the beginning in the setup.
Because you've got this grandfather who is a a zoologist. Is that the typical?
Yeah.
He's an animal person. And then this young boy, Philip, and obviously his mother is going away, so he's going to be left with the housemaid and the chauffeur and the grandfather. And could we talk about, is this a thing? Ordering snakes? Like, how? So he goes, the fucking kid, this little kid goes to, I'm just going to pick up the snake that he's ordered, which is a harmless African grass snake, apparently. So he goes to the pet store, where we have this Dickensian woman who's very sort of, oh, who are you? Get out of here, young man. Get out of my shop.
Get out of here immediately.
Yes.
Yeah.
And so he's gone to pick up a snake. And now the whole plot rests on the fact that he's given the wrong snake that was due to be picked up at that day. How many snakes are ordered a day at this one shop? And it's like, it all rests on this mix-up that he takes a black mamba, the most venomous, deadly snake, back to his residential home in Notting Hill or wherever it is. Yeah. And the grass snake is sent to the toxicology university. And so the fact that these two boxes alone, one doesn't say in marker, black fucking mamba. Like, it's amazing. What a setup. It's so stupid. I think it's based on a novel, but it's so preposterous. And then they don't really utilize that threat that there is a black mamba. It just every now and then it pops out of a drinks cabinet.
Yes.
Or it's going down a vent. And then also the fucking thing can fly, because every time we have a snake attack, we're POV, we are the snake, and it is always at the same level as a person's face. So it will be chasing someone down a corridor at head level because we're POV. It's hilarious. Incredible. For those elements.
I loved the snake POV. It kind of like fisheye lens, right? And you're right. It's just a fully grown man holding the camera at his normal heights. Like, it's like, wow, how tall is this black mamba that it's like, it's absolutely hilarious. Yeah, incredible. And the classic admin mix-up where we've given a literal child a black mamba rather than a harmless pet. Incredible. Just incredible stuff.
But the attacks are all right. Yeah, I quite like it when we get the first attack on that. I think it's Louise. I think the housemaid, and it's just biting at her face like 6 times in a row, and it's really horrible. And snakes. Do you know what? I am scared of snakes. I always think I'm not, but when I think about it, they're fucking terrifying. It's because they can be so far away, but then get to you in a second. Yes. The thought of the way they can spring is one of the most terrifying things. And I think that's utilised really well in this, apart from obviously the flying moment, where I just picture it's what stood on the very tip of its tail moving forward. How is that possible? But the actual snake attacks really did. They scared me. It made me feel very uncomfortable.
Absolutely. I find snakes, I actually personally find them scarier than like alligators and things in films, I think it's that jump scare element, right? It's that thing of like, you open a cupboard and it just pounces out at you, right? And there's always that kind of shot of it coming at the camera, like, and it's always just such a shock. And the fact that it always goes straight at the face, like you say, the multiple bites to the face. Poor Susan George.
It's horrendous.
Yeah. Oh my god.
Yes, Susan George. It's really, and also they can get into our home. That's the scariest thing about snakes and spiders as well, isn't it? That we don't know that we could be just feet away from one. They're just chilling, waiting in your drawer or in your slippers.
Well, that's the thing. It's a scary conceit, this, and I wish they had utilised it a little bit more. That just like, in this lovely big townhouse, somewhere there is a black mamba. Where and when is it going to pop out, right? And like there are, like you say, there are a few powerful moments that work, but I almost wish there would have been more of it. I wanted to see more snake carnage in this movie, But
yeah, because that is a good idea, isn't it? Because okay, so here's an idea. We've got a black mamba in a London townhouse. Fine, we'll just get everyone out of the house and call in a specialist. What what is a clever idea is how can we make it so that people can't leave the house?
Yeah.
It's snakes on a plane, you know?
Yes.
And
yes.
so that's where that siege element is. And so we have people being kept hostage in the house where there is also the most venomous, deadly snake on Earth. Great. It's a great concept. It works. It just doesn't quite pull it off.
No.
And I don't know what would have improved it. And I do think maybe more snake elements, but also there's only one snake and there's quite a lot of people. I don't know. I love the concept. And I do think maybe, you know, if the production had been a little less rocky, we would have maybe got, oh my God, Mike, can you imagine this film if Tobe Hooper had done it? If he'd seen it to fruition.
It would have been... that was going to be one of my questions for you. Like, what would the Tobe Hooper version of this film have looked like? It would have been so much more deranged, wouldn't it, I think?
Yeah. And I think that's what was missing. And I think that's why the concept is great. And I think... And you know, no disrespect, but I think with Hooper, he would have just made the atmosphere feel much more dangerous and palpable, and I think the tension and the scare would be there. But also, I can't see him making something so fucking quintessentially British in the way it was. And I don't know, because this does feel a little bit Mary Poppins or Doctor Who or Quatermass, obviously. But
absolutely, yeah.
The thought of Hooper having this script and what he would have done with it, and also I'd love to know how he would have handled the two actors, or maybe that's why he left. Maybe they're the creative differences.
I think you're right, though. I think that's like Piers Haggard. You know, he's got a relatively small filmography, but it seems to me that he has almost the complete opposite style to Tobe Hooper. Right? When you look at Blood on Satan's Claw, it's very kind of like mannered. It's beautifully framed, like the kind of like the wildlife, the flowers, the almost like tableau-esque kind of shots of the girls in the white gowns and everything.
Yes,
and you know. Quatermass, these very like quintessentially British, quite mannered kind of productions and films, and compared to, as we've already discussed, Tobe Hooper, that makes you feel like you're in hell, like for 90 minutes, basically. Yeah. It's just like a sweaty mess of a movie in the best possible way. So yeah, like it's a really interesting thing that we've flipped from one filmmaker to another in that regard, telling this story. And yeah, maybe that's why Tobe Hooper left it. Maybe he was just like, this is not a project that I can do, you know, but I don't know. It's really interesting.
I just really can't envision it. And I wish it existed. I wish Tobe Hooper's Venom existed, because I really think that could have been something else. It's a shame.
Well, because in 1981, the same year is when he went and made Funhouse, right? And Funhouse that's a Tobe Hooper movie, right? Like that's the difference, right? You've got Funhouse and Venom in the same year, and it's like, yeah, you can see the difference in sensibilities right there, I think.
Yeah, completely. and Klaus Kinski apparently was offered a part in Raiders in the Lost Ark, but turned it down for this because it was more money. And he does get his big moment at the end of this film. His outro, his demise is one of the most
it's so good.
Cinematic, fucking ridiculous things I've ever seen in my life. It goes on for so long. So he's got this snake attacking him. He's wrapped up in a curtain. He's smashing through a window. He's falling over a balcony. He's being shot. It is so ridiculously over the top. And it's in slow motion as well. And it goes on for so long that I feel like, you know, it's his big hero's ending.
Oh,
and
it's so good.
It's almost hilarious.
Yeah.
Whilst also staying effective.
It's great, isn't it? In comparison to Oliver Reed's, which is kind of low-key and nasty, right? Where he gets the snake go up his trouser leg and, like you say, bite him on the dick, basically, right?
Bite him on the dick, I think. Yeah. Because he gets shot and then bitten on the dick.
That's right, yeah. What a way to go. I mean, and that is, again, that's a great creepy scene, like the snake coming out of the vent in the basement and then just like slowly coming at him was horrible, right?
But slowly coming at him and then slowly up the trouser leg, and because obviously he's maimed as well. Horrible, absolutely terrifying. Horrible. It reminds me of the bit in Arachnophobia where it's under the bed and when he's in the sort of forest bed and it just gets him on the thigh. It's horrific. And the scream he lets out as well is just blood-curdling.
Yeah, really good. So those moments are really powerful. And again, like, when it came out of the drinks cabinet, horrible. I thought it was horrible.
It was horrendous. That actually made me jump out of my fucking skin. Because I was like, where is the snake? And then they found it in the drinks cabinet. It's new fear unlocked of all cabinets now.
I know, right? Horrible. And poor Susan George. Like, I've talked about her in a couple of films. Straw Dogs. And then that movie called Fright, a home invasion movie where she's basically just like raped and tortured as well. And I'm just like, every time Susan George is in a film, I'm just like, it's not going to go well for her. Like, it never goes well for her, basically.
Right?
But she gets the real vicious attack, doesn't she, as well? Like, where, like you say, bitten to the face, and then she starts to, like, she can't
foaming
breathe.
And convulsing, she's going blue.
Oh my god.
Yeah. And then gets her finger cut off.
Yes.
I mean, it's off screen, but they use her finger.
Unbelievable. And then you get these other array of just like quirky British characters, right? Like the snake expert woman that gets let into the house, and like all the
toxicology doctor, yes.
Yeah, the British bobbies outside, and it's so strange.
It's very odd. But I do enjoy the bit where we must find the blueprints of the house. There must have been an old sort of servant's exit and entrance and all that. And so I enjoyed all that, but it's neither this nor that. It's a bit of everything, and therefore nothing really stands out as strong enough. I don't think personally.
I agree.
But
I agree.
As I said, I don't want to repeat myself, but watching those two titans of monstrosity trying to share a screen is utterly just jaw-droppingly enjoyable.
Now comes the part of the episode where we thank our next 30 Kickstarter backers for help making Final Cut, the official Evolution of Horror card game, a real thing. Final Cut is now available to buy on our website. Just head to evolutionofhorror.com/shop and pick up your copy of the official horror-themed Evolution of Horror card game, where you can race against your opponents to collect cards and create your own unique horror movie across different subgenres. A big thank you to the following people for backing the project and help make it happen: Annie Jameson, Laura Rankin, Adam Wybray, Bronwyn McMahon and Angela Watchner, Steve Court, Savannah Kelly, Rod Molyneux, Stephen Jessup, Darren Barker, Chris Swanson, Maria, Michael Gilby, Perfect Virus, Andrew, Agatha Klinger, Joe Priest, Julia Amejko, Misadventures, Walter Thomas, Dylan White, Robert McGrath, Leo Kipp, Mater Haggis Burridge, Molly Dyson, Ghost World, John Grain, Jake Nibliski, Chiyoung Chang, Andrew Clegg and Cooper Vaughan. A huge thank you to all of those people for signing up and supporting our Kickstarter campaign. And one more time, if you want to get your hands on the official Evolution of Horror card game, pick up your copy now. Head to evolutionofhorror.com/shop. That's evolutionofhorror.com/shop. The movie was not well received, and it didn't do particularly well, right? It was a flop. It was made for 7 million and it only made 5 million at the box office. And it sort of has been forgotten about, right? Like, I don't think there are many people out there that are particularly aware or are fans of this movie. It's a strange little anomaly of a film, isn't it, I think?
Yeah. And it's super hard to get hold of. I know in America it's streaming on Tubi for free, but even the DVD that they released I think it was maybe the sort of mid 2000s, they've done like a CGI snake on the front to try and make it look like a film that it's not, and it's just bizarre, and it feels like it's forgotten, and I feel like everyone wants it to be forgotten almost.
It's so strange. Would you welcome a remake of this film?
Well, as I said, I think the idea is good, especially set in England as well, where we feel a little bit more safe from these venomous creatures. But so when you do have something that invades, that disrupts that feeling of safety for us, I think it works. But the idea of, I mean, it is snakes on the plane, isn't it? Being stuck in somewhere,
yes,
where you can't get out, and there's
even as much as you've got the bite on the dick, right? That's snakes on a plane. So I guess you're right. We've kind of seen this in other ways, haven't we?
Yeah, but I mean, it could. Yeah, I think it could be redone and just fleshed out a bit, and I think it could work because I think the concept is good.
I always love a kind of like trapped in a room or in a building with an I loved that about Infested, that with kind of threat. Like the tower block with the spiders and stuff. Like I'm always a fan of that kind of claustrophobic narrative.
Yes, exactly.
Well, there we go. Well, that's kind of it. I mean, I don't think there's too much more to say on this movie, but I would recommend people check it out. And like you said, also check out some of the stories of what went on behind the scenes. I think Definitely. That kind of makes the film infinitely more entertaining in a way, I think, when you go into it knowing all of that.
Yeah, I mean, I couldn't even get through everything that I found on it, and it's truly fascinating, the different accounts, and also quite contradicting accounts, and that's always exciting as well, because you have to choose your side and go, which do I believe more? So I think as an experience, do your research and then go into the movie and look out for things. I think that's the best way to do it.
Love it. Well, Stevie, thank you so much. My final couple of wrap-up questions for you. First of all, what is your favourite movie across this whole subgenre? I mean, I know this is an impossible question, but do you have a favourite?
Oh, Mike. I've mentioned The Reef. I absolutely do.
Yeah. Do you know, I still haven't seen it yet. I've never seen The Reef, so I'm going to be watching it for the first time for this series.
I'm so jealous of you. But also, Andrew Trauki's other one, Blackwater, is truly fucking scary. The original, he's done sequel to The Reef and Blackwater quite recently, but it's not his style. It's much more studio and it's much more Hollywood. But the original, those two films are fantastic. Slugs will always have a massive place in my heart, as will the huge 1999 double bill of Lake Placid and Deep Blue Sea.
Yes.
But is it acceptable to say anything other than Jaws?
Well, no. And it's almost like I have to kind of ask people, like, other than Jaws, what's your favourite, right? Because you're right.
Okay,
it's like
Anaconda.
Oh, Anaconda. Amazing. There you
go. I'm going to say Anaconda just because it was the first 15 I ever got into, and I was not 15.
Yeah.
And also, it was one of the first of the 90s to invest in really expensive animatronics. Yes, there's some CGI in there and some very dodgy moments of CGI, but with Lake Placid, Deep Blue Sea and Anaconda, those 90s monster movies where they invested in a mix of CGI and practical effects, those animatronics that they created for those movies are fucking magic, mind-blowing artistry. And so that sort of little triple bill for me. They cover all the big ones: the snakes, the sharks, and the crocs, or the gators. So those three.
I agree with you. And there was a really fun wave, wasn't there? Like we talked about this last week with the 70s movies. Like they kind of tried to bring it back, this idea of like big all-star casts in the 90s starring in these kind of disaster movies and animal attack, whether it was again movies like Twister, Deep Rising, Anaconda, Deep Blue Sea, Lake Placid. Like you say, like there was a real like return to that 70s kind of like B movies with A-list budgets and stars, right? Which was a really fun era.
It's like those 50s monster movies as well. It's like bringing that threat, but having the all-star cast. I loved that wave in the 90s. But when they were not just all the low-budget CGI ones, we had huge studio releases. And I feel like we've recently been getting there again. We're getting these really big budget creature features, with stuff like The Shallows and it's the year of the spiders at the moment. But seeing studios go, okay, I think we're in this phase again, and investing in it, I makes me very excited. But also another shout out, is to probably Rogue.
Ooh,
I think that is one of the better, really, really good gator attack movies, and that's one of my favorites.
Yeah, that's a good one. Amazing. Well, Stevie, thank you so much. Always, what an absolute joy. And we'll be back together podcasting about something or other, I'm sure, very soon. But in the meantime, let people know where they can find you, where they can find Brain Rot, and what you've got coming up.
Yeah, well, you can find Brain Rot, my 80s horror podcast, on all podcast platforms, wherever you listen to them. And as I said, season 5 will be starting, Vicious Varsity. That'll be starting in August. I've got some very exciting guests coming up for that one. And on my Patreon, I think we've got over 130 bonus episodes out there now on Patreon, where we do various little mini-series. Like we've done the Ghoulies series, or with Becky Dark, I've done the Warlock series. Brad Hanson did House, and we've got the Mates of Hell with Alex and Brad on there. We've done 14 episodes now, I think, together. And Matt Draper, I know, who was on recently with you, and he mentioned that we are currently going through all 7 Wrong Turn movies, which I didn't realize there were 7 of, but we're doing one a month currently. 7 Wrong Turn movies.
What the hell?
I mean, at a push, 5.
Yes.
But that's what I thought. But yes, 7. So, I mean, I'm not really looking forward to like 5 and 6 because they look insane. But so that's on patreon.com/Stevie's Brain Rot if you want to come and join in.
Amazing. Stevie, thank you very much.
Thank you, buddy.
And that's it for this week. Thank you so much for listening, and a huge thank you to my brilliant guest, Stevie Webb. What a joy to get to discuss those 2 films together. Absolutely batshit films. I would love to hear your thoughts. Get in touch and let me know what you thought of them. You can email me, evolutionofhorror@gmail.com. And of course, you can find us on all the socials, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. You can also find us on Letterboxd. If you want to discuss this week's episode with fellow listeners, you can join our discussion group. That's the Evolution of Horror discussion group on Facebook. Or you can join the Evolution of Horror Discord, and there you can also join weekly watch-alongs to coincide with our current Nature Bites Back season. This podcast is part of the Evolution of Horror Network, and if you want to listen to more EOH content, check out our sister podcast, The Detective and the Log Lady, in which Stacey Ponder and I are rewatching and discussing every episode of Twin Peaks on a weekly basis from beginning to end. You can find the Evolution of Horror wherever you get your podcasts, of course, and if you get a spare moment, I'd be so grateful if you could drop us a little rating and review on your podcast app of choice. That always really helps us get discovered by new listeners. So, on to next week then. Next week's going to be another really fun double bill. We are continuing with the theme of nature, but we're moving away from animal attacks now, and we're talking about something even creepier and more deadly: killer children. Next week, I'm going to be joined by the wonderful Anna Bogutskaya, and we are going to be discussing Who Can Kill a Child, the Spanish classic from 1976, and the not-so-classic British film The Children from 2008. It's going to be a really fun double bill. Join us next week for all of this and more on the Evolution of Horror.